enthusiasm, we've decided to give you a longer leash.
You think you got a leash on me? Might be you built this litter who's got out, but I'm the one who made it a home.
Leland Coyle is one of the most prominent threats that Reagents will have to deal with during the events of the game The Outlast Trials. A corrupted officer of the law that has a strange fascination with electricity, Coyle would find himself involved in Project LATHE after a long rap sheet of questionable circumstances. Chosen for his charisma and cult of personality, Coyle would be inducted into the program to become one of Dr. Easterman's prime assets, the rarest and most feared of all of Sinyala's psychopathic patients.
You!
We got fucking law here! We got fucking law!
The story of Leland Coyle as we know it begins with a man named Dr. Hendrik Joliet Easterman and his research into the concept of brainwashing. Easterman had been contacted by the CIA in 1953, which would eventually lead him into a deal with Murkoff to investigate the potential of mind control. This relationship leading to the creation of the Sinyala facility and into his study, which would be codenamed Project LATHE. His first foray into the subject would see Easterman taking a more scattershot approach to investigation. He would make rudimentary attempts to control by using things like positive and negative reinforcement, along with copious amounts of injections, but progress on that front would be minimal at best. However, there was another area of interest that he'd stumbled upon thanks to the recent events of the Second World War, and that interest was in charisma. Easterman saw the control that Hitler had managed to gather in Germany with the sheer power of charisma alone, and in that power, he saw a possibility. He wanted people with the ability to influence others into acts beyond their cultural taboos. People with the ability to turn a sane crowd into a mob of lunatics. And so, to that end, he would get into contact with a Murkoff agent named Clyde Perry, and make a request for Perry to bring him as many Hitlers as he could find. This request eventually leading him to Leland Coyle.
He's guilty, and that bitch will fry! You do not contradict the testimony of an officer of the law!
Through uncertain means, Perry would find out about Coyle, who was a police sergeant in Blackwell, Oklahoma. Digging into his background, he would run across several very disturbing findings. Anecdotal evidence of animal abuse and sexual assault led him to be pushed into a military academy education at a young age, before he would join his local Ku Klux Klan chapter as a teenager. As a young man of 19, Coyle would marry, only for his wife to die 6 months later after falling down the stairs. When people would question this death, Leland would join the military as a way to evade investigation. During this time, he would serve 2 years in the Pacific, with 3 confirmed enemy kills and 2 suspicious American deaths within his company. Despite some questions, however, he would be honorably discharged and make a return to Oklahoma, where he would resume his activities with the KKK, as well as find a position with the local police. This newly imbued authority would allow Coyle to continue and even expand his deranged lifestyle. As an officer, he would be very effective at bringing in revenue for the precinct. However, these funds would often be obtained illegally through things like extortion and civil forfeiture. Despite this, he would be showered with accommodations and even an eventual promotion to sergeant. As for his personal life, Coyle would remarry not once, but twice. In his second marriage, he would extort his wife's family before they would all die in a mysterious electrical fire. Then, when his wife would flee to Chicago, she would somehow die officially of natural causes, despite her body's gruesome condition. His third wife would fare no better, as both her and her family would all die to suicide, each in more violent circumstances than the last. Regardless of all the negative that Perry would dig up on Coyle, though, he also found that he was still well-liked within the community. Something about his charisma drew people to him, and he was held in high esteem even at locations like the VFW and the local Elks Club. This charm somehow allowed people to brush off Coyle's bleedingly sharp edges and even embrace him despite some odd tendencies, such as his fascination with electricity, a passion that Perry would observe as Coyle would stand out in the fields entranced by storms when lightning spit from the sky. All these details would mark Leland Coyle as a person of interest, but in order to truly vet him for Project LATHE, Perry wanted to meet him face to face. Under a pretense of bribery, he would lure Coyle to a bar and begin discussing business. But before long, Coyle would sniff out his game. Angry, Coyle would beat Perry mercilessly, leaving him with 2 broken fingers, multiple bruises, and blood in his urine. This situation would confirm 2 things to Perry: that Coyle was dangerous, and that his charisma was undeniable. Exactly the kind of man that Easterman was looking for.
Not guilty. Don't you dare call a fucking mistrial! The bitch is guilty!
At Perry's recommendation, Leland Coyle would find himself at the Sinyala facility, undergoing the grueling therapy of Project LATHE. With the guidance of Easterman and his already deranged personality, he would quickly prove himself as a truly exceptional psychopath, and as such, he would be promoted to a prime asset, a thought leader who would reign over his own little kingdom that he would fill with his delusions of justice. Just as Easterman had thought, the charisma of Coyle would see him forming a cult of personality with other LATHE subjects, but there was a problem. Coyle couldn't be controlled, nor could he truly control his followers, at least not to the extent for them to be of any use to Murkoff or Easterman. His goal of brainwashing and mind control had failed, and as Murkoff threatened to pull funding from the project, he was forced to reflect on where his shortfalls had been. He would come to the conclusion that the fault was with his subjects. Ex-Pops were too psychologically damaged before the process had begun, and prime assets like Coyle had too much charisma to control. In order to save his funding and his study, Easterman would pivot to truly unexceptional subjects: the homeless bums of the American welfare system, people who could be broken down into nothing, with Coyle acting as a constant source of contradiction, a symbol of absolute justice in a space of total anarchy. Leland Coyle is one of the most dangerous men that can be found on the grounds of Murkoff's Sinyala facility. A man whose disgusting past has only been brought to thrive and expand in a world that celebrates his perversions. In a fabricated domain of justice, Coyle is the law. He rules with an iron fist and a sparking baton, and God help any who are unfortunate enough to break his sacred, unwritten laws.
I wish your mama was here to see you.